just have an idea and you haven't generated a single dollar of revenue, then that is the time to pitch. That's when you want to be pitching your seed round, because it's all about the excitement around your idea. The moment you generate $1 of revenue, everything is focused on revenue.
This next segment is brought to you by the Landman Office, the Emerald Triangle's premier land agents. The Landman Office is a full-service real estate company who uniquely specializes in rural, off-grid, and cultivation properties. Their versatile agents are knowledgeable in the sale and purchase of residential, commercial, industrial, investment, development, off-grid, cultivation, and timberland properties. Go to humboldtlandman.com for more information.
Welcome to another episode of Capital Cathy, the show that talks about women who have gone through the fundraising process for their business. With roughly 2% of investment capital going towards women-founded businesses, Capital Cathy discusses the hurdles women face in financing and how to navigate the waters to secure funding for their companies. Today's episode, we have Julia Jacobson, CEO of Aster Farms. Julia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and what it is that you were doing before you got involved in the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. So I started my career as a buyer for Bloomingdale's. I was there for about 4 years, specifically in the men's department, merchandising, and I left there because I had an entrepreneurial itch, and I saw a problem in the supply chain in terms of marketing and how Instagram and all the social media was starting to drive purchasing decisions, and how disconnected that was from the actual buying process. So I launched my own startup, ran that for about 5.5 years. We went through the Techstars program, which was an incredible boot camp for me in terms of being a CEO, raising money, all the things we're going to talk about. And in 2016, my company was acquired by XO Group, and I went on to work for them for about 1.5 years as the Director of Commerce and then the Director of National Revenue Products. So my background is in retail and in technology. But I have always been a both medicinal and recreational user of cannabis, and I really believe in the power of the plant. I also was extremely burned out at the end of all of that and just wanted to get my hands in the dirt. So things kind of came together. My husband, who's my co-founder, his grandparents have been growing cannabis in Mendocino for 50 years. And his family practices all sustainable organic agriculture. So it kind of all came together and led to where we are today.
How did you two come to meet each other?
That is a great question. So we actually met through a mutual friend who was a vendor of mine when I was a buyer at Bloomingdale's. He was then my co-founder in my first company. And he introduced Sam and I while we were living in New York and both running our own companies. We've been together for 9 years now, so we really supported each other as entrepreneurs. He was running a film production company, and I was running InMarket, my affiliate marketing technology. And we had talked about maybe doing something together in the cannabis space and kicked it around for a couple years. But when the legislation started to change in California, we were learning more about the family background and history and agricultural practices. We both decided that it was just the right time to just go for it. And we weren't quite sure how it was going to work working together, even though we had, spent time supporting each other running our companies. It's very different.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the industry looked like for women back when you joined, and how do you feel it looks like now for women?
Yeah, so I'll kind of jump back in my career as a buyer at Bloomingdale's. I was surrounded by really strong, smart, motivated women. I had a lot of mentors in that space. And leaving there and going to tech was really a 180. The tech industry was definitely dominated by men. Fundraising definitely had gender bias. And it was tough for me. I definitely changed my personality, the way I dressed, things about the way I articulate, to cater to that. And so getting into the cannabis industry back in, 2016 was really refreshing. It's not only supportive of women. If you look around, at least in California, many of the companies, at least many of the brands on shelves in California are actually run by couples. So it's a very family-oriented, friendly space for founders, at least when we started out.
Tell us a little bit about the inception of Aster Farms. Was that something new that you and your husband put together, or was that the name of his grandparents' farm? How did you guys decide to start cultivating? Because that is a serious undertaking in this industry. Everything from being outside all day long in the heat or in the rain to harvesting. What can you tell us about the inception of the farm and what that journey has been like?
So we had spent a lot of time in California, specifically Northern California, visiting Sam's family and friends of ours. And we just didn't see the cannabis brand on the shelves that spoke to us. We're conscious consumers. We shop at Whole Foods. We use Mrs. Meyer's cleaning products. We wear Patagonia. We care about where the food that we consume is grown, how it is grown. We care about who the companies are behind the products that we're purchasing. We're very careful with where we put our money and supporting companies that believe in sustainability, believe in workers' rights, all that. And so we didn't see a product like that. The cannabis industry has come from a place where there's a real lack of transparency. And sustainability and all those qualities that we believed in really are espoused in the idea of transparency. So we wanted to create a brand that spoke to us and to consumers like us. And we believed that that was a brand that didn't scream marijuana. It didn't have marijuana leaves all over it. It didn't have 420 references, didn't use the word kush or a play on canna or anything like that. We wanted to hearken back to the idea of organic farming. So we wanted to name it after an agricultural product and farm. So we were looking around. We were actually studying the different flora and fauna and birds and species that are in Northern California where our farm is. And we happened upon asters. Aster flowers are the largest species of flowering plants in the world. There are actually 23,000 species of asters, including sunflowers, daisies, and if you walk around California, you'll see these little purple and white flowers that kind of look like daisies. Those are the traditional California aster. And so we created our brand to really speak to the colors of the earth in California, the green rolling hills, the mountains. Our branding has a mountainscape in it. And that was all really important to us to really ground it in the idea of organic, sustainable farming and back to the earth, but to do it in a much more modern way, not a heritagey way. In terms of how we connected the cultivation piece, Sam and I are definitely not farmers. We are learning and we are fascinated by it, and we spend about 1 to 2 days at the farm every week, and sometimes we spend the weekend just because we can't get away. And so we actually connected with one of Sam's oldest family friends, Noah, who had studied sustainable agriculture at Bard and has been growing cannabis in Northern California for 15 years. So he believed in the same principles as we did in terms of sustainability, organic inputs. We believe in growing in ground, growing our cannabis right in the ground, not in pots, outdoors with the sun and the rain and the wind. And so we were really aligned on all of that. And he was a fantastic grower. So we joined up and went into business together.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And I really liked what you mentioned about the many species of aster flowers, because as we know, there are so many different strains in the cannabis industry. Probably a strain to match every aster flower, it feels like sometimes.
Absolutely.
So professionally, when you set out, you came together, you're like, we want to build this farm. We have these certain core principles that are very important to us. Can you speak a little bit about professionally what it was like to construct a solid concrete business in the cannabis industry? There's a lot of gray areas. people say, you're as good as your word. Now that regulations are coming to the surface and states one by one are coming online, can you talk about what it was like to build a business in kind of a semi-unregulated market, a little bit of a gray area? What was it like dealing with other professionals in the industry? Were you dealing with, corporate individuals, or were you dealing with more people that were kind of homebodied individuals?
That is a great question, and I think that's something that we are still dealing with today, 4 years after we originally launched this business. I think in some ways I enjoy the regulation and some of the structure that's been put around it because, when you're building a tech company, there is just boundless opportunity, and too much opportunity can also let you get distracted. And so by forcing you to focus on, okay, it is so difficult to get a license, we're going to go for one license, which means we're going to focus on that part of vertical integration. So I actually really have liked how the regulations have kind of put boundaries on which direction you can go. I think that's actually been pretty helpful. But even in the regulations, it's a gray area. One of the most challenging years, I would say, was 2018, because that's when the majority of the California regulations were in full effect, that as a licensed operator, you had to be following certain protocols. But it was also just when it all rolled out. And so the regulators, the agencies that are regulating cannabis were figuring out every day the loopholes, the quirks, the things that didn't work. For instance, I remember we went to a 5-hour training for how to use the actual state online application program to submit your application. And you get all the way, ours ended up being 180 pages, our entire application. It's a real endeavor. And you get to the end and they say, okay, this is the payment page. And they show you, okay, you could pay by e-check or you can pay by credit card. And everybody in the room starts mumbling and giggling, and finally somebody just yells out, we can't bank. And so the regulators hadn't even thought through the fact that we can't bank, and so they had built an entire payment system to get your license around online bill pay. So, and so we're dealing with that every single day. But fortunately, the agencies, so long as you are a good operator, you are following the law, you are licensed, you are putting everything through track and trace, the regulators are really receptive. I am in touch with the Bureau of Cannabis Control, Metric Track and Trace, CDFA, which is the California Department of Food and Agriculture, which regulates our cultivation licenses. I'm in touch with them on a weekly basis. And sometimes we're figuring things out together, which is fascinating. So that's kind of on the more regulatory side. On the supply chain side, it has been a very different story. There are black market operators who are trying to get into the legal business, who promise you everything's in order. We've had situations where we're going to buy clones or seeds from someone, and the PO has been issued, everything is in the works, and they said that they had a license. They sent us a piece of paper that looked like it was a license. The day we go to pick it up, oh, sorry, can't go through the metric system. Our license is actually expired. And who knows? Did they ever have a license? Did it actually expire? There is a database we try to look up to confirm before we put wheels in motion with people. But it really is a word of mouth. It's a small industry in California, and, you just need to network. You have to know who you can call up and say, hey, have you worked with this operator? Have you worked with this trimming company before? Have you bought sourced product from this farmer before? Because it is a wild mix of operators ranging from utterly professional and corporate to truly Wild West.
A lot of great facts there in what you said. I lived in Humboldt County for almost 10 years, and so I know exactly what it's like dealing on both sides of the spectrum. And, as this industry continues to grow, hopefully we can weed out some of those people in the industry that, blatantly never had a license to begin with, and sometimes you can tell when it's just like, did you think that I was going to go, under the table? Well, you thought wrong.
Exactly.
I appreciate your honesty there. That is so direct and just so true. So when it comes to branching in from, you have the cannabis side of your business. Now, like every entrepreneur knows, we need money to finance. So can you tell us what it was like? Maybe was Aster Farms the first time that you had gone out to raise capital? Had you done it before? And if you had done it before, what can you say was the difference when hunting for capital for a cannabis company versus capital for a, traditional company?
So it was not the first time I had raised capital. I had raised 2 rounds of funding, both first of friends and family and then a seed round for my technology company. And it is night and day raising money for a tech startup versus a cannabis company. And on multiple reasons, on multiple levels. Number one is when you have a piece of software, a tech concept, it is really difficult to truly articulate your consumer prop and differentiation in a sea of ideas, 10 of which are probably your same idea, executed differently. And the market is saturated. It's a wide range. Even though you might go to a VC who specializes in, marketing software. So for us, affiliate marketing, that would be relevant. They are still investing in a crazy range of products. And so their expertise in that one specific thing isn't very deep. And so you really have to be the expert. And you really have to be a salesman. When it comes to cannabis, it's a product. It's a CPG product. It's a thing that exists. It has an enormous market of consumers that have been consuming it for decades. It has a market price, whether it's the market price set in the black market or in the current legal market. It is an actual commodity, and there are variables about it that you can judge. You can judge the potency, you can judge the flavor, you can judge the terpenes, the cannabinoid profile. And so going out and raising money for an actual thing that has a market value, that you don't have to explain what cannabis is, the person you're pitching knows what it is just so refreshing and so wonderful and so much easier. It really is unbelievably night and day from pitching like a tech idea. And then on the other side of things, I think we had an advantage because I had pitched and raised money in the tech industry. So I knew how to put together a really good pitch deck. I knew how to put together a pro forma. I know how to put together a data room. I know that all those things even need to be put together in the first place and shared. I know how you go through the formalities of the courting and the dance with VCs and with investors and how to ultimately close a deal. And I know what the terms are. I know what a convertible note is, what an equity raise is. I understand those things. And a lot of people raising capital in the cannabis space don't have that business background. It is their first time raising capital. They don't necessarily have a business partner who has raised capital. And they don't necessarily know all those pieces of the puzzle. It's their first rodeo. So we have regularly gotten feedback from investors that on their side, it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air because we're coming to them with a clean pitch deck. We're telling them the KPIs they need to know. We understand the dialogue that has to happen to get from point A to B in the relationship with them. So it has obviously been challenging. There is limited capital out there, period. There's definitely limited capital in cannabis because of the potential risks associated and even just being associated with it. People are concerned about that. And then it's even harder being a woman raising capital in cannabis. So, I'm not saying it is easy at all, but compared to raising money in my last company, it is a walk in the park.
And you mentioned being a woman raising capital in this industry. I mean, do you find that is it harder being a woman in the cannabis industry raising capital, or is it harder in the tech industry? I would assume it would be harder in the tech industry because, I mean, that's another industry that's known for not having a large presence of women involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Raising money as a woman in the tech industry was a miserable experience. I had many incredibly sexist, inappropriate things said to me over the course of pitching investors, and that has not happened a single time raising money in the cannabis space. I have not had one inappropriate comment about my age, when I might have children, if that's going to ruin the deal, people hitting on me. None of that. None of that has happened in the cannabis space. But just being a female CEO, and being a woman raising capital, I know there are aspects of the feminine side, and I'm going to go out and say this. I'm talking about myself. I'm not going to make a generalization about other women, but I know there are aspects about my personality that skew towards the more feminine gender traits that make it more difficult for me to raise money, not necessarily in the eyes of the investors judging me on gender bias, but for example, I am not as aggressive as I probably should be, both in terms of just coming out and saying, like, let's get this deal done. These are the terms. You have 1 week. Let's get on with this. I am also meticulous in counting the beans and how many dollars we have to actually raise, and really breaking that down, as opposed to saying, okay, we're calling it $5 million, 20% to this, 20% to this, et cetera. My use of funds is like 47.5% towards CapEx. So there are aspects of my own personality that I believe are gender driven that give me a handicap. They don't necessarily, the gender bias in cannabis, in my opinion, is not coming from the investors.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, you brought up a great point, really having that business experience and just having that knowledge to work with and applying it into raising funds in other areas. Did you have a mentor when you were when you first started off in your career? Was there anyone that kind of guided you through, or did you just kind of trial and error? Did you figure it out? Because, from my experience, I didn't have a background in print magazines, but I just did it and I got better as time went on. It kind of shows. It's a little painful when I look at the first couple issues of our print magazines, but fast forward 8 years later, we got it right. And so did you have any mentors that you were able to reach out to when you were going through all these things for the first time?
When I launched my first company, I was really gung-ho about doing it myself and doing it all myself, including bootstrapping it. And now, retrospectively, I realized that was not the right move. We kind of puttered along for too long at the beginning. And it was finally when I got pushed to the point where I was like, look, we need to either get into an incubator that can kind of whip us into shape and give us this network that we don't have, or we need to, figure something out or just shut down. And so we started applying to incubators and got into Techstars, and that just opened up the whole world to us. At these incubators, at least at Techstars, one of the things they do at the beginning, it's called mentor madness. And for like 4 weeks, almost every single day, you were having like back-to-back 20-minute meetings with, I think we had maybe 75 mentors to my class at Techstars. And these are people that Techstars have vetted very carefully. They're people who are experts both in their actual specific industry and in general, either as like CMOs, CEOs, CFOs, et cetera. And they're people that Techstars believe can lend a particular helping hand to the companies in that class. And so we formed really great relationships with the mentors in our Techstars program and with the Techstars staff and managing directors. So those are the mentors who I have carried on. One of my mentors from Techstars is both an investor and an advisor. We speak every single week. And so it's, that was incredibly important for me, and those people have helped me through some really challenging times, both with my first company and with Aster Farms.
Yeah, advisors are good. They definitely help, and finding strategic ones is crucial for the growth of every company, I would say. So looking back on your experience, is there anything specific that women can do to get funded or to help build their business up before they go out and look for funding?
Yeah, so it depends. So I remember somebody once told me, I think it was somebody at Techstars who said this, maybe it was our managing director. If you just have an idea and you haven't generated a single dollar of revenue, then that is the time to pitch. That's when you want to be pitching your seed round, because it's all about the excitement around your idea. The moment you generate $1 of revenue, everything is focused on revenue. So if you are confident enough that you're going to have that hockey stick revenue to be able to go out and raise on your revenue, then go out there, turn it on, turn the spigot on. But if you think that you need revenue to get to that point, or you need investment support to get to that revenue point, then do not turn it on and make sure you're raising before that first dollar comes in. Because what you don't want are weak sales and attempting to go out raising while puttering along with weak sales. So I would definitely say that's one decision that you need to make. And then once you go out to raise, it's really about getting your materials in order, making sure, there are great online tools. You can check out PitchBook. They have tons of examples of pitch decks. I think Sequoia has really good information about what should be in a pitch deck. They kind of outline it. So you should make sure you have a really good pitch deck, a really good pro forma, so have your financials in order, what your projections are, and be confident. Just, you're going to get pushback. Not everybody is the right investor for you, and that's a hard thing to learn and understand at first, but be confident in the decisions that you've made and your convictions about your own business, and go out there and stick to that. Obviously take feedback. If you hear something over and over and over and over again, then it might be true. But you can get whiplash from investors. One person will say one thing, somebody will say something else. And so you really have to hold your own line and have conviction and confidence in what you're building and what your vision is and what you believe in. I would say as a female founder, that's probably the most important thing, is walking in that room with confidence and conviction.
And you mentioned something so important, having, a bad investor, because it really could make or break your company sometimes, especially if things go south. What can you say to someone who's never raised capital but has been offered investment by someone that they just know is not the right fit?
Oh man, this just happened. And let me tell you, if you're raising money out there right now, there are sharks in the water. So this is absolutely a time when you're going to get some bad incoming offers. You can literally lose 100% control of your company. If you have a bad investor who has bad intentions, if you have somebody who's trying to come in there and take a controlling stake of your company, and if you don't know what the triggers are and what kind of the levers and logistics are for an investor to get controlling share of your company, talk to a lawyer, do some research about it. But if somebody's coming in and they want controlling stake of your company and, they offer you a debt deal or something like that, and you can't pay that debt when it gets called, they can literally take your entire company, as in you own 0% of the company. So you have to be super, super careful about who you're bringing on. You can also have investors who ask so many questions and want so much information from you. There's a level of information that is absolutely important and appropriate to be providing your investors on a regular basis. But there comes a point when an investor is not helping and they are just getting in the way. And so there are very scary ways in terms of taking a controlling stake and actually kicking you out of the company or taking over the company. And there are other ways that are just a nuisance. And really running a company and scaling, especially as a startup when you're raising VC money, you have to have your eye on the prize. Like, you have to be 100% focused. Your capacity is always going to be over capacity. So you can't have somebody, always in there poking you for information, questions, wanting to talk about things. If they are not doing that in a productive way that is actually helping your business move forward. So there are multiple ways an investor can be, quote unquote, a bad investor. And, it's tough. That's why people say you should raise money when you're not desperate. When things are going well, raise money. because when you're desperate, it's a lot harder to say no to investors who are going to be bad actors on your cap table. And so, one thing that we've done is work with our mentors. Every time terms are put out there for me, I immediately go back to our mentor from Techstars, our interim CFO who's consulting for us, a couple of our investors, and run it by them. And, as long as you're getting advice from people who have seen enough deals out there in the market and have a good enough pulse, they're going to be able to guide you on whether something is a little bit fishy or not. And then also just trust your instinct. If somebody doesn't feel good, like you are getting in a relationship with this person, a deep relationship. If you don't feel good about them as a person, don't bring them onto your cap table.
Great advice. I appreciate that as an entrepreneur who's gone through this. I appreciate that's really good advice. And I want to ask one final question, and this has been a great interview. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and you're really on top of it. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that listen to the show that are really going to appreciate, such directness and such honesty, like what you said today. My last question for you: if you had a crystal ball and you could see the future of the cannabis industry, what's in store for us?
Ooh, well, I think that the precedent that was set with COVID, cannabis has been deemed an essential business, not just in California, statewide, but all across the country, in many states and many counties. I think that has set a new level of precedent nationally and is going to help us move forward on some legislation that's really important to this industry. I think within 2 years, we're probably going to see some banking relief, the cannabis being descheduled and banks being able to actually take on cannabis companies. I think that's going to be step number one. I think we're probably 5 years away from being able to ship cannabis from California to New York legally. I think it's going to take a while for the borders from state to state to open up and for that national transport to be able to happen. But I think in the near future, we're going to start to see not just, the however many states are legal now. I think we're going to see every state in the U.S. have some level of cannabis, whether it's medicinal or it's full medicinal and recreational. And I think we're going to start seeing some banking legislation happen in the next couple of years. That's what I'm hoping for, at least.
That sounds exciting. I'm hoping for that too.
I also think right now, consumers, when the markets first open up, consumers have no choice over the brands that they have accessible to them to buy. And it was really a free-for-all. Dispensaries were just taking any legal brand that was out there. They needed the product. If you look at Illinois cannot keep product on the shelves. And so I think we're going to see over the next year, at least in California, in the way that our market has matured, you're going to see consumers starting to actually know brands, become loyal to brands. You're going to see dispensaries start to become loyal to brands. So I think brands are going to become very important in the ecosystem over the next year.
Well, I can't wait to have some Aster Farms over here in New York. I look forward to it.
Hopefully in 5 years.
Awesome. Well, Julia, thank you so much again for coming on the show with us today. And it has been an absolute pleasure from California to New York, coast to coast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This is a pleasure.